And then came Firestone, who indeed took an aim at biology itself. In the dialectic of sex, she declared that pregnancy, barbaric, and the family unit, a form of tyranny. Her vision, ultimately, was quite chilling. Reproduction without women, families without fathers, and bodies without boundaries. Firestone had no goals of equality. She wanted to erase womanhood entirely, to remove pregnancy from the body, to completely abolish the nuclear family, to replace biology with technology. She believed that the only way to be free was to completely escape the female form in itself. And unfortunately, it worked. These ideas fractured women from their own biology. Motherhood was no longer sacred, sexual restraint or boundaries was seen as a weakness, virtue became oppression, and the feminine became a costume. If you were told that pain meant oppression, that childbirth was chains, that nurturing or being nurturing is so outdated, you were absorbing Firestone's gospel. I hope by now you can start to see how second wave feminism fused cultural Marxism with spiritual rebellion. It glamorized the self and diminished responsibility. Feminist text praised witchcraft, sexual liberation as empowerment, abortion as a right instead of a moral tragedy, pornography, hookup culture, and promiscuity as markers of freedom, not even disclosing that the things that women did not want to be valued for or degraded down into was indeed the value that now women had to lead with. Steinem herself endorsed feminist occultism. What began as a movement for equality had become a full-blown ideological inversion. This was and is a deliberate psychological operation to destroy modesty, shame, and sexual restraint, especially in young women. By encouraging women to divorce, work, and raise children independently, second wave feminism replaced the husband with the state. Government welfare programs, state-run schools, legal and financial systems that incentivized single motherhood and positioned interdependence on the covenant of marriage as a mistake. And what so many women do not see is that this aligns with globalist interests, not individual fulfillment. Break the family, increase state dependency. And this brings us to part 3, the third wave of feminism. And this is where womanhood started to completely disappear. When truth becomes relative, womanhood becomes undefinable. Rachel Wilson. Third wave feminism didn't just distort womanhood, it dismantled it. No longer is it united around the female experience. It divided itself into identities, grievances, and contradictions. Intersectionality began as a valid critique, but it evolved into this hierarchy of oppression, where being a woman was no longer enough. Instead of seeking unity amongst women, feminism began fracturing into subcategories. You needed to be queer, a person of color, disabled, or non-binary in order to claim moral authority. And biology was soon set out to be erased. Judith Butler's queer theory said that gender is performative, not reality. Soon, being a woman was a feeling, something that anybody could claim. Women's spaces, sports, and even safety were sacrificed at the altar of inclusion. So feminism became competitive and tribal, with victimhood becoming the new form of moral authority. The more oppressed categories a person could claim, the more power they held in the movement itself. And this newfound focal point within the movement moved feminism away from a universal definition of womanhood, and instead created a fractured identity matrix, where being a biological female was no longer the uniting thread. It also encouraged resentment, envy, and perpetual grievance, not cooperation, not uplifting. And as a consequence, feminism began to devour its own. If you did not affirm the ideology, you were labeled a TERF, a bigot, a relic. The category woman became so fluid that anyone could claim it, even biological men. This meant that women's rights, ironically, no longer had a subject. You could not advocate for female-specific issues without being accused of exclusion. And this was the final inversion. Third-wave feminism sided with a worldview that denied objective truth. And in doing so, it sacrificed the very people it claimed to protect, biological women, who are now being erased, displaced, and completely gaslit in the name of inclusion. But it goes even deeper than just that. At the same time, victimhood became virtue. The more identities one could claim, the more power that they held. Words were redefined as violence, no longer judged by intent or truth, but by the emotional response that they triggered. Safe spaces, which were once intended to protect healing, became these ideological bubbles, where dissent was dangerous and curiosity was condemned. Campuses that once encouraged inquiry now have trained their students to catastrophize discomfort, to view a new challenge or being called out on poor behavior as traumatic, and to believe that emotional safety should override open dialogue. And this created a generation that is allergic to confrontation, communication, or alternative perspectives, incapable of a healthy debate, and completely conditioned to collapse under any form of responsibility or pressure. Instead of empowering women, third-wave feminism bred fragility. It exalted hypersensitivity, rewarded grievances, and suppressed resilience. Women were taught that discomfort was danger, that any disagreement, specifically from a man, was harm, and that silence was preferable to the risk of offense. And this carried on as cancel culture replaced growth. Forgiveness was no longer the goal. Shame became a form of currency, and redemption possible. Even feminists who started to raise questions about this were excommunicated from their own movement, and now feminism had become a religion without redemption. I want to re-emphasize that the intention behind these movements was not inherently harmful. Many were rooted in some form of genuine care. But when care becomes hypervigilance, and when disagreement becomes offense, we risk building a culture that is ill-equipped for the complexity, responsibility, and difficulty of life. They told you that motherhood would make you small, that your body was a burden, that your husband was your captor, that your instincts were oppression or internalized misogyny. But what if that is not true at all? What if your longing for partnership, for family, for meaning is not a weakness, but wisdom? You are not just a body, and you are not just a worker, and you are not just what other people say your potential is. You are the keeper of life, the steward of generations, the emotional center of civilization, the sacred vessel in which all human life enters the world. That's not oppression, that's power, and they knew it, and they feared it. So if you're still here, I thank you, because this conversation isn't an easy one, but it is necessary. This isn't about shame or trying to change your mind. This is about clarity. The mountain that you've been told to climb may lead you somewhere, but it may not be where your heart truly wants to go. The beliefs that were supposed to free you may have isolated you, but it is never too late to return to truth, to choose love, and to reclaim what it is that they tried to erase. Not by hating feminism, not by resenting the past, but by remembering who and what you are. Because a woman's strength isn't found in rejecting her nature, it's in returning to it.